You're listening to a Thames Estuary Partnership podcast, celebrating London's famous tidal river. We hope you enjoy it.
Hello, I'm Eve Sanders and I'm the Estuary Edges Officer at the Thames Estuary Partnership. Hello and welcome back to Talk of the Thames and to our first episode of 2021. I hope you're all keeping well and safe during this difficult time. We have a very exciting lineup of episodes coming your way this spring, so please do subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified every time we release a new episode. But now we are kickstarting the year by talking about a very impressive project that's aiming to improve London's waterways by reducing the sewage from entering the Thames. I'm sure most Londoners will already know that the Great Stink was an event that happened in central London during the summer of 1858. The hot weather that they had that year intensified the smell of the untreated sewage and industrial waste that was being emptied into the Thames. This caused an unbearable stench, as I'm sure you can imagine, and also contributed to the spread of diseases such as cholera. The authorities finally accepted a proposal from a civil engineer called Joseph Bazalgette to move effluent eastwards along a series of interconnecting sewer tunnels. This system worked, and the Thames and its ecology started a long journey to recovery. However, Joseph's impressive engineering feat was built for the capital's Victorian population, which was only around 3 million. These days, however, London has a population of close to 9 million, and so Bazalgette's system has steadily overflowed. The Tideway Tunnel is the UK water industry's biggest ever infrastructure project and is building a 25-kilometre super sewer under the Thames. This will intercept the overflows from Bazalgette's system, helping to clean up the river for both people and wildlife. But to find out more about Tideway, I spoke to their CEO, Andy Mitchell. Andy, how are you doing?
Hi, Eve. Very pleased to be here. I'm very well, thank you very much. Start of a new year. You've got to believe it's a better year than the one we've just got through. So looking forward, I think.
But everything crossed. It's an improvement from 2020 anyway. Mm-hmm. So, Andy, let's get straight into it. How long have you been working on the Tideway Tunnel project for?
Me personally, 6 years now. No idea where all that time has gone, but I joined about a year before the company was created, the regulated water company that is Bazalgette Tunnel Limited, although we call ourselves Tideway because it's easier and people can't spell Bazalgette, so we wouldn't get any emails. So yeah, 6 years. We've been operating as a company and as a project for 5 now.
Amazing. Okay, and it started you started work on the project in 2016. Is that right? The Tideway Tunnel?
Yep, we awarded the contracts in August 15, but really we didn't start turning up on site until the following year. That's right.
So for people out there, I mean, what is the Tideway project and why do we need it?
Okay, so in a nutshell, we're building a sewer, which is a very large tunnel. The tunnels are bigger than the Crossrail tunnels. So we talk of sewer and you think of a pipe, but actually it's a 7.5 meter diameter tunnel that runs under a lot of the Tidal Thames. And alongside that, we're building shafts or interception points, as we call them, such that the moment where untreated sewage is flushed into the Thames on a regular basis, we capture that. What normally currently comes through the river walls, we capture that, we drop it down a shaft, connect it to the main sewer, and that goes all the way out east and joins up with the lead tunnel, which is a similar sized tunnel, which goes from Abbey Mills to Beckton, which then allows all of the sewage, or the vast majority of the sewage that currently goes into the river, to be taken to Beckton Sewage Treatment Works, where it can be treated. So that means before all of this started, some 40 million tonnes of untreated sewage every year was being spilled into the Thames. And by the time we finished and we've got all of that intercepted, we'll be reducing that by about 95%.
That's a huge amount.
It's a huge amount of sewage going into a capital city river, any which way you look at it, and it's a huge reduction. But also because what we're doing is capturing the first flush, as we call it. So you've got sewers that are full of sewage, and then it rains, which is what causes most of the issues. And the rains go down the drains and into the sewer, and build up a force in the sewer, which flushes what is currently in the sewer into the river, which is the pure sewage. By the time ultimately our tunnel fills up, which it can do, and we expect it to, we've got to do something with the sewage, and that's the same choice as always: let it go back into the streets or put it into the river. So the river is still the spill point, but at that point it will have been raining for at least 24 hours or more, and heavily raining. So ultimately what spills back into the river might be 5% of the current volume, but actually it's much more diluted with rainwater. So what we typically say is we're reducing the volume spillage into the river by 95%, but actually the volume of sewage that's going into the river is reduced by about 99%, and it's much more diluted and therefore much less damaging. So it's a fundamental shift in the way that we as society are treating the river. And we believe that once we've done this, the river will be cleaner than it's been in any time in the past 250 years, which is fundamentally before the volume of humanity came and did what humans tend to do to the environment. So it's a fundamental shift. It'll happen very quickly once we've commissioned, because the river flushes itself. It is a tidal river, and river comes over the Teddington Weir, and water comes over the Teddington Weir. And therefore the river does clean itself, and within about 3 months, any of the sewage that had been put into the river before we commissioned will have been flushed out to sea. And from that point on, the river is quite a different thing.
That's amazing. And if I'm right in thinking, I mean, with the sort of improved water quality, enormous benefits for wildlife, both terrestrial, because I suppose the fish will be healthier, and then the birds that eat the fish will also be healthier. Mm-hmm. So what are you expecting to see in terms of the benefits for wildlife?
Well, it's interesting. One thing that we won't see change is the color of the river. It's a muddy estuarine river. It always was, it always will be. So it's always going to look the same in terms of its color. But what we know will happen is that we'll see a restoration of the wildlife in the river back to what it used to be, which will mean healthier river inhabitants, healthier fish and eels and all the other things that live there. You've got to remember that you go back 200 years and the river was heavily farmed for eels and oysters, and in theory that could happen again. So it'll be a restoration of what the river used to be like. It's possible, and there are views, that the biodiversity of the river might reduce once we've commissioned, because some of what's in the river is only there because of the sewage.
Oh, really? That's interesting. What kind of species?
I'll be honest. I'm not an expert. I can get the answer to that, but what we would, there is a wide range of fish in the river. There is now. When we've went through the process of building out into the river with our steel cofferdams to create the dry space to allow us to build what we have to build. Every single one of those we've had to drain carefully and capture all the fish that were now entrapped by what we'd built, and monitor them and check them and and all of that. And there is quite a wide range. Some of the bottom feeders fundamentally, I think, is what we may not see so many of, but we will see, as I say, the sort of range of fish that we would have seen 200 years ago.
And Andy, what will happen to the plastics, and also the sort of sewage discharge contains plastics, whether that's through, I guess, flushed PPE masks as an example, or sanitary products? How will it capture? How will there be less plastic pollution going into the Thames?
So I think that works on a number of fronts. One is, as you say, anything that people are currently, and in most cases wrongly, putting down their toilets.
Absolutely.
We should capture the vast majority of, apart from, as I say, those few occasions when our system gets full. So that's an obvious reduction. The other thing, you also do have a certain amount of plastics that get washed into the sewer system from the roads, so bottles and bottle caps and all sorts of things like that, which again we should capture the vast majority of. But the other thing that I think is part of the longer term, and we hope sort of living legacy, is that if people can learn to see the river in a different way, then I would hope that we'd see less things thrown into the river. Now, some of that is waste bins near the river being full and not emptied properly, and therefore the wind blows and they blow in. But you'd like to think that we'll actually see people being more careful about what they casually discard into the river. We often say that the Tidal Thames is the city's largest single public open space. It's way bigger than all of the green parks in London put together. And you don't see people wandering around Hyde Park just throwing plastic around willy-nilly. So why do we do that sort of thing with the river? And part of this is people's attitude and how people think of the river, which is why when we talk about our challenges to do the engineering and build a tunnel and all of that stuff. But actually our vision is one of reconnecting London and Londoners with the River Thames. And what we really mean by that is helping people feel differently about it, such that they don't trash something that they ought to value. So part of this is hopefully a sort of social, societal shift in thinking. And so whether it's because of what we capture, or whether it's because people are more mindful about what they put or don't put in the river, we will, there's no doubt, see quite a significant change in the volume of plastics.
That's fantastic. You're right. I think people are starting to become more aware, I think, of the plastic crisis, thanks to programs like Blue Planet 2, which highlighted a lot of the plastic issue. But is there anything Tideway are doing to sort of inspire people and educate people about the sort of unflushables and things that people shouldn't be throwing in the river?
Yes. Actually, when you sit back and look at it, we've done an awful lot on sort of other things as opposed to just doing the engineering piece. And Thames 21, we've always worked very, very closely with them. They were key supporters of the project in the early days. With the whole Thames River Watch piece, there's a number of components to that in terms of foreshore cleanups. I've had the whole board, my chairman and all the shareholders and investors out on the foreshore, picking up not volume but doing surveys, putting a 1 meter square out and saying how many things are we finding that we shouldn't be finding in the top couple of inches. And it was staggering. We were counting something like 250 to 300, let's say wet wipes. I don't really mean wet wipes, sanitary products and all sorts of other things. 250 to 300 in a square meter, in the top three inches or so. And so there's a lot of that sort of survey work going on, but we've also been involved in the sort of water quality sampling, just to get a good baseline of where we are now, so that there's a good comparative for later. But a big part of the Thames River Watch piece and the whole of the Thames 21 effort is again raising people's awareness of the incredible natural facility that we have in our river, and the value of the river and the foreshores and all, everything that means to us. So we wholeheartedly have been working with Thames 21. I've got to say, we all love doing it. In a lot of ways, this is an easy project to feel very good about. It's manifestly obvious why this is a good thing to do, and we see that enthusiasm in ourselves, and we see it with all the people that we support getting closer to or becoming better acquainted with the river, I guess.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It's great. It's great that you're all really passionate about it, but also I think it was Thames 21. I read a really interesting report about the wet wipe situation actually changing the topography of the Thames, floor bed. And I mean, that's just insane. That's mad. So, I mean, that is already a massive benefit to having this tunnel is, as you say, other products from gathering within the Thames.
Well, it's, I've seen this firsthand. One of the locations I've been out doing these surveys was on a particular inside bend of the river at Fulham. And so we now go back to our geography lessons and remember that deposition happens on the inside of the river curve because the water's going slower. And we were scratching away at the top, 2-3 inches or so, but there was feet. That we've got surveys that prove that the river bed levels have increased feet, and it's all of this that's being deposited there. So, and I think it's one of the things that I really hope we see, and the more we can, as we say, reconnect people with their river and help people think of things in a different way. By building the sewer, we'll stop the addition. But there are still many, many locations where there are inches and feet of stuff that shouldn't be there. And I think it would be lovely to see that once we've stopped the flow or the introduction of all of this stuff, wouldn't it be lovely to see a river long campaign of why don't we do a once and for all pass through all of this? It might take years, but let's just get rid of all the stuff that shouldn't be there, because as we know, the plastic isn't going to disintegrate. It's not going to go away. So there's stuff to be done afterwards. But I'm hoping that if enough people care enough about the river, then that's something that would then seem like a worthwhile thing to do, or a pointful thing to do. It's
already a massive success story, the Thames, from going, being declared biologically dead on a couple of occasions throughout history. Yeah. And it's now thriving, really, and hopefully this is only going to make it thrive more. And then, as you say, there's still work to be done, but it's hopeful. It's looking hopeful for the Thames, dare I say.
Oh, I mean, I think yes, it's absolutely right, and it's right to acknowledge that. And I think it's when we talk about the Thames, we talk about different aspects of it, and it's what the Thames means to not just the environment and the ecology, but what it means to society and the value that it brings, but also what it means from a commercial point of view. And as you know, we put a huge amount of effort right at the beginning of this project. We called it More by River, which was what we meant was we already had commitments to move an awful lot of the construction material by river, and quite rightly so, because we're on the river. It would have been bonkers to do anything else. But we said, well, fine, that's what we're obliged to do. How much more can we do? And we put a lot of time and effort into building bigger cranes and bigger facilities, and actually paying for new barges and new tugs to be able to take more volume, which then led us into the whole virtual Thames, the simulator that's at HR Wallingford, where workers, pilots on the river can go and train the same way that an airline pilot would in this virtual simulation, and have clippers driven at them and put them through their paces, sort of thing. And that existed as a result of all of that. The Thames Skills Academy that we supported which was all about upskilling a new generation of people to work on the river. And we're seeing it already, but of course, as we disappear, the big question is, well, what's London now going to do with this newly proven capability? London's only here because of what the Thames offered in terms of shipping. If you go back to international trade and all sorts of other things, and that capability is still there. And we've often talked about the last mile. So delivery, if you're within a couple of miles of the river, and you're a supermarket or a shop or whatever you are, currently it is highly likely that all your deliveries come in by truck, and it's a diesel truck on the roads of London. And for all the reasons we understand, that's not a great thing. But if you're within a couple of miles of the river, you're talking about the last couple of miles only. If what you were receiving came by river, and yes, it needs more facilities along the riverside to allow that to happen. But if you're then just talking the last couple of miles, you're talking about an electric mile. You're not talking about a truck that needs diesel because it's got to come in from outside the M25. So there's a whole bunch of the way the river operates, and the potential that we think we've proven. We've shifted we will have shifted 5 or 6 million tons of material up and down the river on a 24/7 operation critical process, in a modern way, with a newly skilled workforce and all the rest of it on the river. So it would be a crying shame if that then wasn't used to further benefit London, and we hope that's one of the other sort of byproducts, if you like, of what we're doing turns out to be.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I've heard the HR Wallingford's cool piece of kit, the simulator. Have you had a go on that?
I did, yeah.
Yeah. I'm so jealous, because I spoke to John Bohr from HR Wallingford, and he was telling me about it, and I was like, right, that's my ambition. As soon as I'm back in London, I'm going there. To see it. Cool piece of kit.
It is staggering. I mean, the guys, or the people at HR Wallingford are to be massively praised for what they've done. They've got 2 rooms actually, and technically there's another 4 in Perth in Australia, because Wallingford did some modelling for the harbour there. So in theory, there's at least 6 locations in the world where you can sit in a virtual Thames concurrent with the other 5 people, and you can undertake simulations. And certainly when I was sat there, I said, what happens if the visibility gets bad? So they turn the fog on. So you're in a room and you look 360 around you. There's screens all around. You've got all the controls that you'd have on a tug, and all of a sudden you've got big waves and thick fog, or snow, or rain, or high winds. It's just a phenomenal piece of kit, but it's professionalizing and making it a lot easier for people to learn in tough conditions, without having to do 30 or 40 years of on the job training, if you like. And of course you can't replace the real thing, but it's a marvelous addition to the skills and capabilities of the Thames.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. And also, Andy, I've heard rumours, very realistic sort of health and safety training for Tideway staff. I mean, what's that about? It's quite interactive.
It is interactive, yeah. Again, like a lot of things on Tideway, we said, okay, a lot of us have been on big projects before. Now, what are we going to do better? You always want to do better on the next one, and certainly with the health, safety, and well-being of everyone working on the job, we said, okay, well, let's start with a clean piece of paper. What do we know works? What do we think we could do better? What have we always wanted to have a go at, but for whatever reasons never did? And that's sort of how we started. And ultimately, what we've done is set up it's an induction. It's a 1-day course, actor-based, where a number of actors play out various scenes, and some of it's quite quite tough. Ultimately, the scenario is around someone who's killed in an accident, and then you end up with an interview with that person's daughter, who wasn't born at the time, but 21 years later, reflecting on what not having a parent was all about, and it's a tough and very memorable. I can still remember every scene, and okay, I've done it a couple of times, but I still remember the first time I sat in on that 4 or 5 years ago. And every single person on site has been through that, and you don't change people in a day, but it's the start of helping people think about things in a different way. Over 22,000 people have been through that course now, and not all of them have worked on Tideway, but it's part of the whole process of joining Tideway and hopefully understanding and thinking about things in a different way. And actually, I think it's quite typical of what we've done on Tideway, which is, what would brilliant be? Okay, well, how do we do that? Is a sort of approach that we've taken, and I'm pleased with that. It's we people are still human beings and people still make mistakes, but this is all about helping each other and supporting each other and watching each other's back. So yeah, it's an important part of the whole process of getting on Tideway.
Fantastic to have heard more about that, because I had heard a few rumors about it and I was like, oh, that sounds really interesting that it's so state of the art by the sounds of it. Going back to the engineering of Tideway, what are some of the sort of key milestones that you've hit?
Well, the truth is they're coming thick and fast now. Yes, it's been 2020 was a difficult year, but we still had quite a few big milestones in terms of we've had 6 tunneling machines. 4 of them have finished now, and 3 of those finished in the past year. So starting tunneling is always really exciting, but finishing it is even more exciting because that means you've got that piece of risk behind you. So a lot of that. We've finished all bar 2 of our big shafts, some of which are 70-80 meters deep, and quite often our shafts are connected to the main sewer that runs under the river by a connection tunnel. And hopefully this week we'll see the last of those being constructed. So we're seeing big milestones all the time. The last 2 machines, tunneling machines, one started just before Christmas and the other one started last Saturday, or a couple of days ago. So it's still coming, and really what we're going to see now over the next 18 months is the finish of this, the finish of that, the finish of the other, all of which will culminate in, right, now it's all built, now we're ready and we can start the commissioning process, which is a process in its own right. But the truth is, the moment you've sort of opened up the tunnel and you're receiving sewage, fine, you're learning how to operate. That's part of the commissioning thing. But the bottom line is the river is being cleaned up at that point, and that's quite exciting.
Very exciting. So you're saying that the results should be almost instant then, as soon as the tunnel is open?
Well, it will. As I say, you won't be able to see it in the color. But the truth is, with an almost complete cessation of spills into the river, and recognizing the fact that the river flushes itself in 3 months, then technically, 3 months after we've fully commissioned, there shouldn't be any sewage in the river, or radically reduced and more diluted, and effectively a river that isn't being polluted. And and the truth is, that's why we get out of bed every day. That's the point where we want to get to.
Absolutely. Well, that's fantastic. But I mean, how did COVID affect Tideway? Because I'm guessing has it all been plain sailing?
No, it hasn't. You've got to cast your mind back to middle of March last year when everything kicked off, and we knew something was coming. Obviously, we didn't know what and to what extent, but in very short order, we had to shut down all of our sites. There was a lot of concern, understandably, about using the tube. A lot of people were very nervous about their own health and whatever. So the only rational thing to do at that point was to put our foot on the ball and say stop. We had a couple of very particular operations that would have been actually quite difficult, if not dangerous, to stop. A couple of particular smaller tunneling pieces, but we found a way of getting them to a safe point to stop. But for a short period of time, we had everything stopped. But after about 6 or 8 weeks, once we'd figured out, okay, how do we work safely? What does social distancing mean? Sort out all our one-way systems, sort out how canteens do or don't work, and how many people should be on site, and all the rest of it. We progressively got back up and running. It wasn't immediately back to full capacity, but by July, August, we were pretty much up to the full workforce headcount that we had pre-COVID. That being said, then and still now, we have well over 1,000 people working from home. And that'll carry on for some while. But here we are, second week after Christmas, and pretty much all of our works are back up and running. And we, as we always do at the start of a new year, we don't just turn up and start shoveling immediately. We sit back and say, right now, is this good? Are we safe? Are all the things in place that we'd want to? And that process we've been going through on every site, obviously with a very particular COVID viewpoint. But as we've been satisfied, yes, we know we can continue to work safely, then that's what we've been doing. And I've given up trying to predict things during the pandemic, but at the moment we're very comfortable with what's going on, and that we will keep under review until hopefully we're in a better place.
Absolutely. Well, like I said in the beginning, hopefully things will get better from here. We can only hope. But the completion date is still, is it 2025?
It is. I mean, that's the sort of the end of the commissioning, if you like, and the sort of proven that in all foreseeable circumstances, all sorts of weather conditions, we know how to operate this. But as I say, almost from the very moment we start commissioning and introduce the first spill point, the river will be a little bit cleaner. And then every spill point we add into the commissioning process will be another step towards a slightly cleaner river. So ultimately, yes, 2025 will be saying, all right, that's it. It's, we've proven and we can pack up and go home. But actually, the improvement starts the very first moment we make our first connection. And we've said we need to take stock once we've got hopefully beyond COVID and we have a greater predictability. And we've said that in the late spring, early summer of this year, which we hope will be in that position, then we'll be able to say, okay, well, now what does this look like? What do we think the date to aim for is? But it's round about then.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, for anyone that's wanting to go and find out more, I thoroughly recommend checking out Tideway's social media. That's where I saw an amazing video of your tunnel boring machine. And it looks terrifying, but it's also really impressive. So I really recommend people go and have a look at that. Andy, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. That was really, really interesting. And I look forward to seeing the progress of the river.
Okay, Eve, thank you very much for your time. Been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you so much for joining us for our first episode of 2021. It was really great to talk to Andy and hear about Tideway's progress and the benefits that it will hopefully bring to the river. I will be back next month with a brand new episode, but until then, keep safe. Bye-bye.